Okay, hi. I am Julie Dunn. I am from Hardin County. And I am honored to introduce a doctor of anthropology, a man of many talents, Robert Leonard, our moderator for the Truth Teller Forum.
How do you out?
It's a daunting task to introduce Bob in just 2 minutes, trust me. I met Bob when he was a part of our Clean Water Forum, along with David Schwartney at Pine Lake in Hardin County last October. Bob also moderated Austin Farrick's book tour stop in Iowa Falls in April, and I was very lucky to be a part of that event too. When I think of Bob Leonard, I think of Clark Kent, a mild-mannered reporter who transforms into Superman when something touches a pressure point in his heart or his head. And when that happens, a valve opens inside and out comes hot truth, evidenced by his lifetime of study, observation, and experience. I tried to put together a basic list of his background and accomplishments, but the list was too long, so he's going to have to tell you about his favorite stuff in a minute. I bought his book, Deep Midwest, and simply put, it is a beautiful thing. I also got my hands on Yellow Cab, written about his time driving a taxi in Albuquerque. It's fascinating, and it was made into a play that ran for 12 sold-out performances there in Albuquerque, and it was even done in Des Moines a couple of times. Wish I had seen it. In June 2023, Emily Hawk wrote a story for the Oskaloosa Herald that tells about Bob's work in radio. Bob seems to sum up his life's work in that article. Anthropology and journalism have the same roots with the ancient Greek historians, which is seeking to understand the world around us, he said. That's what journalists do. That's what anthropologists do. So without further ado, Dr. Robert Leonard.
Good. Think I need to move this up a little bit, maybe. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. You're wonderful. Thank you to everybody in the room. I'm having a little bit of imposter syndrome right now. Why am I standing up here? And thank you for all of your wonderful work. Thanks to Hugh and Tim and Lisa for inviting me here to speak today. I see friends in the audience, also my friend D'Artagnan. Thank you for the music. Thanks to the caterers. Thanks to everybody that helped pull this together. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself because I want to tell you the importance of knowing our identities, who we are, and where we come from, and what our values are. Because we can talk policy all day, but when we have our identities and our values behind us, we know we're doing good work.
Right.
So I grew up just down the road in Dogpatch on the north side of Des Moines with 5 of us in a 1-bedroom house without running water. We were in the shadow of the Meredith Mansion, and I was born wondering why some people were born into everything they might possibly want, while the rest of us didn't have very much at all. I'm the product of public schools. I love public schools. I love public school teachers. I went to Johnston High when it was little, all of Johnston Elementary too. I went to Johnston when it was teeny. I went to the University of Northern Iowa on a wrestling scholarship. I would have never, ever been able to go to college. I went to the University of Washington for my PhD in anthropology. My dad was a carpenter, and I learned the carpenter's trade. And if you can't see it from here, there is a big blue-collar chip on my shoulder. I've also been a bartender, a cab driver, a car salesman, a river rafting guide, an archaeologist and anthropologist who worked throughout much of the American West and northern Mexico. I've done historic preservation for the Zuni, Hopi, and Navajo tribes. I've also been a professor, a radio reporter, and a journalist. I've written dozens of books and scholarly articles. I have bylines in the New York Times, Time, USA Today, a whole bunch of other places. And in radio, I interviewed over 8,000 islands. Over 8,000 islands told me their stories. And in case you can't tell, I also have ADD, which I consider my superpower. These experiences helped create my identity, but my identity and yours are refined by our values. Think about your identity. Think about your values. Where do they come from? Who are you? What do you believe? My values come from my family, and while I haven't been to church for a long time, they also come from Sunday school. Welcome the stranger, feed the hungry, heal the sick. Those are my values. And those are the values of every religious and secular tradition that I know. Share those values. Those are values that we all share. And so know what your values are and know your identity. Be proud of your identity. Be proud of your values. Share them. And importantly, use them to build community and power.
Yeah.
Think of the through lines in today's panel. The assault on immigrants, the banning of books, the purposeful fouling of our water supply, the assault on public education. Power over these issues has been taken from us, and we want it back. I'm like you. I do my work. I write to change the world, to make the world a better place. And it's organizations like CCI and the people that are in it that are the tip of the spear. The great anthropologist Ruth Benedict wrote that the purpose of anthropology is to make the world safe for human differences. And I won't stand by, and you won't stand by, and the panelists won't stand by while indignities are forced upon us, minorities, the LGBTQ community, on immigrants, on teachers, on public schools, and none of us will stand idly by.
It's not that good.
That's why we're here today. And if you already aren't a CCI member, I encourage you to be so and be involved. So let's think about the Fearless Truth Tellers panel. Fearless means bold or brave. They are bold and brave. Truth means conformity with facts or reality. It's time for more facts. Teller means a person that or thing that tells, relates, or communicates, and we honor our panelists today. The truth is being attacked, distorted, suppressed, and those who tell it are being threatened. They are being threatened. I don't know exactly how or why. Dave perhaps risks his job. They work in their communities that getting, our other panelists are perhaps getting threats. All of you that seek to speak and tell the truth in your neighborhoods sometimes feel like you're on dangerous grounds. You are fearful for telling the truth. And here I'm going to quote the poet Maya Angelou. And when they asked her, when she takes the stage or when she engages with people, how does she have the strength to do it? And she says that when I take the stage, when I engage, I am never alone. Everybody that I've ever known, I've loved, gay, straight, black, white, whatever color they are, they stand with me, they stand beside me. And so when you go out into the world to bring about the change you wish to happen for the betterment of all of us, you stand together with CCI, with the panelists, with everybody in the room. Like Maya Angelou, you are never alone. And I just can't say how honored I am to be here with our panelists that are doing so much great work. Each of them is going to tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to engage in a conversation. I'll facilitate that conversation. And if it goes really well, I'll have to shut up and they can just keep talking. So, Vanessa Marcano Kelly is a Venezuelan American who grew up between both countries. Vanessa is board chair of Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice, a grassroots organization pushing back against politicized attacks on immigrants and new islands. I love that phrase, new islands. Sarah Hayden Paris is founder and president of Annie's Foundation. Sarah helps lead the fight against book bans in Iowa, and she's a fearless champion for freedom to read and without interference from state house bullies or school boards. David Swertney is professor and director of the Center for Health Effects of Environmental Contamination at the University of Iowa. David is a prominent voice on connecting the dots between corporate agriculture and Iowa's clean water crisis. Thank you all for being here. Let's begin with Vanessa. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, what you're doing to fight the good fight, and why.
Perfect. Okay. Hola. Buenos dias. Okay, if I don't stick to my talking points, I'm going to talk forever. So you'll see me reading a little bit. Anyway, my name is Vanessa Marcano Kelly. I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela. And the last iteration of my immigration journey began in 2008. And sometimes I'm asked, why Iowa? Well, I came here in 2012 after graduating from South Dakota State University, go Jacks, to work as a community organizer for Iowa CCI's Latino Organizing Project. So I did that for 2.5 years, and I would say it was one of the most transformational experiences in my life because it helped me discover that, one, I'm actually really passionate about communication, interpretation, and translation specifically. So I became a court-certified interpreter, professional translator, and that's what I do now. But more importantly, I'm really passionate about organizing with my community for immigrant and workers' rights. And the only way to truly achieve systemic change is doing that trabajo de hormiguita, which translates to like grassroots little ant work. And we have to do that work consistently with patience, righteous anger, and the ability to find joy in this work. So I'm married and I have a dog named Kal-El, Calito Animalito, and I became a U.S. citizen in 2019 after... This is like my 5th year of being a U.S. citizen. So after nearly 2 decades and tens of thousands of dollars in an alphabet soup of visas in our immigration system. So why am I doing what I do? So I'm currently on my 2nd term as board chair of the Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice, which is right across from the Iowa CCI headquarters, so you can see us there. And Iowa MMJ is a statewide organization that provides free or low-cost immigration legal services as well as advocacy and organizing for migrants in Iowa. And Iowa MMJ is the merger of Iowa Justice for Our Neighbors and the American Friends Service Committee, and we officially launched in April 2021. So since then, we have helped thousands of new Iowans along in their immigration journey, anywhere from people who received DACA, temporary protected status, asylum seekers, refugees, permanent residents. And they actually, when they were AFSC, they helped me with my citizenship too. So, and we punched way above our weight when it comes to immigrant rights organizing. We've done lots of leadership development and civic engagement. And unfortunately, Governor Reynolds had been pushing an awful anti-immigrant agenda in Iowa. And in response, Iowa MMJ, with the help of the ACLU and the American Immigration Council, has sued Brenna Bird, the AG, and we are also doing Know Your Rights trainings, talking to workers, working in coalitions with allies such as CCI to build the movement for a more welcoming Iowa. So, why am I doing all of this? So I first came to the United States back in the mid-90s, many of my iterations, as Venezuela was going through one of its many economic collapses. My parents wanted a better education for me, as many migrants do for their families. And although economic reasons were not the main driver of my migration journey, as soon as you come here as an immigrant, your history, any past privilege you had, what your parents did, what school you went to, all the Latin American class markers, none of that stuff matters. You have to navigate a new society, a new language, a legal system, limited employment, and you're going to be excluded. You're going to be ridiculed. You're going to be told to speak English because you're in America. You're going to see your parents be treated as ignorant simply because they don't speak the language or because they have an accent. You have to pay higher tuition. You have no access to scholarships. And that's when you have papers. So that experience, as well as teaching English to dairy workers in South Dakota, hearing about their awful work conditions, learning about the foreign policies that drive migration to the U.S., and then seeing the exploitation, wage theft, and abuse of immigrants while I organized at CCI, developed an undying solidarity with excluded people. And it's that same organizing work that taught me that it is us, everyday people, who by organizing strategically, speaking truth to power, and seeking to get a seat at the table can one day win the world that we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, would you go next?
Sure. Where do I turn this on?
It's already on.
Oh, perfect. Hey, everybody. I'm Dave Swartney. I'm a professor of engineering at the University of Iowa, where I also direct the Center for Health Effects of Environmental Contamination. Where I also direct the Center for Health Effects of Environmental Contamination. I want to start by saying I'm just absolutely, truly humbled to be up here with this group. I think the issues they work on take a whole heck of a lot more courage on a day-to-day basis than it does to be a professor that works on clean water. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'll also say that when it comes to fearless truth tellers in water, I think Chris Jones, a good friend of mine, is about the best example out there who spoke out with a tremendous amount to lose as a non-tenured staff member at the university. I'm, on the other hand, a named professor with about as much privilege as you get. But I will say I'm not the only water quality scientist in the state of Iowa, but I am one of very few, and I would probably say it's me and Chris and plus or minus a few, like one or two others, that's just willing to speak to the reality of where we are with our water resources in the state, that our approach to nutrient reduction is not working, and a new path is needed that probably absolutely will need to include regulation if we want to see water quality improvements. That the problems we have aren't just limited to what we do to damage down in the Gulf of Mexico, but it hurts communities here at home who have to struggle to find safe and reliable drinking water and worry about the safety of that drinking water for their public health. That we have to move Iowa beyond ethanol. We have to start to envision what Iowa can be without corn ethanol. And that our problems are more than nitrogen. We spend so much of our discourse on nitrogen, but I've heard about PFAS. We have lead. We have access issues in mobile home parks and with private well users. There's so much more, and we need to expand that conversation. Those are all controversial things in Iowa today to talk about, and that just blows my mind. I wish it wasn't. So why do I do what I do? I grew up in Southern California, the son of an engineer and an educator, so now I'm an engineer that educates. My parents taught me a lot of those same values that Bob spoke to, but California shapes how I approach water. When you're from a place that is water poor and wonders about where water comes from, I am absolutely astounded at what blatant disregard we have for the quality of our water here in Iowa. Like so many, I got into the environmental space because of a high-profile environmental disaster during my youth, the Exxon Valdez. I actually think those types of high-profile events are easier in many ways to get people on board than sort of the slow-rolling problems we have here in Iowa. But it's other things. The things I do in Iowa, I think everybody... This should not be crazy. Everybody should have access to safe, affordable, aesthetically pleasing water, not just to drink, but also to recreate on. It's important for our quality of life. And then with the center I direct, the Center for Health Effects of Environmental Contamination, there's just no cutting corners when that's the title and you're the director of that. When you try to find a politically correct way to do health effects of environmental contamination, people get harmed. So the things that give me hope, things are changing. When I got here 15 years ago, all I heard about was the Gulf of Mexico. We have never had so much dynamic discourse about water and the impacts to Iowans as we do now. We need more of that. The majority of people are on the side of the environment. When given the chance to vote for I Will, the majority of Iowans did it. We can't forget that people want clean water. They want access to public land and parks. We have the majority on our side. The youth is on our side. I have a daughter who's going into high school and a son who's starting middle school. They come home and they talk to me about what they learn in school. I had a discussion with my daughter about ethanol, and we could have frank conversations. So they worry about climate. They want these things, and that gives me hope. And last but not least, as everyone has said, this room and your approach to driving change make me very optimistic to work in this space. So thank you for having me. Looking forward to our conversations. Stay on.
Hello, I'm Sarah Hayden Paris, and I am a Johnston mom. I have 2 kids in the Johnston School District. They are both boys, 13 and 15, and I am also the president and founder of Annie's Foundation. At Annie's Foundation, our mission is to ensure that members of our community have unhindered access to books and characters that reflect the diversity and complexity of the world around them. So Annie's Foundation is made up of 6 Johnston moms, and we all met by going to Johnston School Board meetings. We were looking at agendas and realizing that there were some things that we really weren't happy about, and we started going and paying attention. They tried to ban 2 books in the Johnston School District in late 2021, and so we became friends through that effort. And one of the moms that we met during that time was Ann Laurie Smith, and she was a passionate defender of public education and, was very outspoken against the book bans. And then she tragically passed away in June of 2022, leaving behind 3 kids in the Johnston School District. So we were inspired to do something to honor her memory and give her kids a legacy that they could be proud of. And that's how Annie's Foundation started. So what we do is our main event is banned book giveaways. I was actually at the Des Moines Farmers Market this morning giving away banned and challenged books. So we've done dozens of those. We initially thought that we would do one a month, and it's been like 3 a month. So we're very busy. And a big part of what we do at our banned book giveaways is education. We do a lot of education. There are a lot of educated people in this state who are completely unaware that books are being banned. And we don't really have anyone who comes to our table and is like, yeah, I'm totally behind these book bans. They either avoid us or they're just appalled because they see these books that they read in high school and they're appalled. Why we do what we do? Representation matters. We know that people, all readers, need to see themselves reflected in the books that they read. When we don't see ourselves in the books that we read, it sends a message that there's something wrong or something shameful about that part of your identity. they think that it is not a good situation, especially for kids who are, learning their own identities and learning who they are. But when we do see ourselves reflected in the books that we read, it's affirming and positive, and it can show that, whatever your identity, you can have a healthy life and happy life. And that's the message that we want our kids to receive. In Iowa last year, SF 496 was passed. That's the book banning law. There was news yesterday that came out of that. The injunction was removed. Find me later. I'll tell you why that's not necessarily a bad thing. So there's hope. And so in conclusion, Annie's Foundation, so far we've handed out 7,887 books. Although by noon today, I would imagine we'll be over 8,000, which was our goal. So the really cool thing is that for every book that they have pulled out of public school libraries, which is about 3,400, we have put 2 more back out there in the community. So we're winning.
Great, thank you. I'd like to ask all the panelists what we in this room can do to help you in your mission. We'll start there.
All right. Okay, good question. So I think, being here, being in community is one of the good things that you can start doing, talking to each other, and thinking about in the immigrant rights and workers' rights issue specifically, think about your neighbors and like who your kids go to school with and like the lovely festivals and restaurants that we have. But also, I mean, immigrants are part of this country and have been part of this country for a really long time. And it's just part of who you are and who we are. And unless you were a Native American, like you were an immigrant or your family member was an immigrant. So it's a very human thing to migrate and to move, and it's a human right. And so I think seeing yourself reflected in that and not just seeing, like those people or like, angelizing them and saying they're amazing. No, they're just everyday people, flawed and who want to come here, work, and everything. And so I think that seeing yourself reflected in who the immigrant community is here in Iowa, and then following what we're doing at Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice, or there could be local organizations in your side of town that might be working with immigrants, and they're probably connected in our coalition's calls. And so whenever there is some sort of action call or, write to your legislator, or if you have a chance to speak to city council people or your chiefs of police and saying, this is why I care about this issue. Immigrants are my neighbors. They are us. And why are we demonizing them? Why aren't we instead working together, seeing each other in how to improve rights for all of us? That's one of the things, especially just feeling that empathy and then finding the local ways of engaging to do something about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, I think this group is already doing a lot of really positive things. So continue to educate yourself on our water quality issues and push back against some of the narratives that seem to frame things as if we have momentum and things are improving, or looking for convenient excuses like the one we always make fun of, geese and beaches. Beaches make up a small segment of our waterways. Bacteria is our number one impairment. It's across the state in our creeks and streams. There's not enough geese on the world today to account for how much contamination we have in Iowa. So know the facts, know the evidence, listen to the folks who like Chris and myself, if you can, when we're out there doing our, engage us, ask us questions, because there's a narrative that things are going well and improving, and it's just not based in evidence. And so that accountability piece, that calling bullshit, we need a lot of that. Even with all the issues we have monitoring gaps, testing gaps. Some of you are involved with testing programs as participatory scientists. That's awesome. Get out there and find opportunities and work with us. We're happy to test for more than just what you can do with a nitrate test strip. We often just need access to people willing to be boots on the ground. And think of simple fixes. There's a lot we could do that other states have done to protect our private wells, to put funding towards treatment for private well users. Listen to folks that have those problems. I just did an event where we spoke with folks from manufactured home communities talking about how when power has gone out, they've lost their water. And I've learned that we don't require auxiliary power at those small water systems. That's an easy thing to advocate for, that in a changing climate with derechos that will knock out power, we should be just thinking of the small wins that will have huge impact just because we didn't know that was a problem in the first place. So help unearth those, share them with us, and then let's advocate for those types of simple changes that will be big wins, even if they aren't, hey, we're beginning to actually make, huge traction on regulating farming. There are other wins to have.
Thank you.
I can think of two small things that you can do to push back against book bans. The first is educate the people that you know. Just by virtue of being in this room, you probably know more than the average person about book banning. So talk to them, make sure they know that it's happening, that it's part of a nationwide pattern, and that it's happening here in Iowa. And, point out those books that everyone has read. To Kill a Mockingbird is now banned in Iowa. So is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and The Color Purple, and whatever your favorite book is, it's probably banned in Iowa because there's 1,000 unique titles on there right now. So education, our website has a lot of stuff on it. We have a blog on there that's written by a lawyer. So there's a lot of good content if you feel like you need to learn a little bit more so that you can educate the people in your lives. The other thing is pay attention to school board meetings. It'll take you 5 minutes every 2 weeks to go out and look at the agenda, look it over, see if it's anything that concerns you. And that's not just for book banning, it can be for other things as well. But it's important to keep an eye on that. It's a very small thing that you can do. Even if you look at it and you see something that appalls you and you can't make it to the board meeting, then start educating other people and say, hey, this is going on, let's show up.
Thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you hear. For example, I think, Sarah, you probably hear, we just want to keep pornography out of the schools. David, we probably hear, you hate farmers. No. Vanessa, you probably hear, there's lots. I was just thinking about what former President Trump says about immigrants, but what's the thing that you hear the most that you have to fight back against? So I'll let each of you deal with that.
Want to start over there?
Sure.
I think, first of all, there's the mistaken belief that there is pornography in schools. And I like to remind people that there is a legal definition of pornography. And nothing that we're talking about is it, even that picture from Genderqueer that they like to point out so often. The other thing is, I just completely lost my train of thought. We get called pedophiles and groomers all the time, so that's super fun. I don't usually see the people that I give my books to ever again, so I'm not grooming them for anything. Not sure what the point of that would be. The other argument is that it's not a book ban because they can get it elsewhere. And that's just not true. Removing or restricting access is still a book ban. It's just really convenient to say that I can still get it somewhere else. But, not everyone has access to a public library. I mean, obviously in theory you do, but if you're a 12-year-old kid and your parents work, different shifts and you can't get public transportation, that library is effectively inaccessible to you. And, a common argument, especially in the Des Moines suburbs, is, you can just go buy the book. And it's like, that's nice, but that's not a financial reality for so many people. So we need to make sure that those books are in public school libraries because that's where the kids are every day and that's where they can access those materials.
Thank you.
So Bob pretty much hit it on the head. Whenever I point out issues with water quality in Iowa, I'm immediately usually get a response of something like, well, you also like to eat, don't you? As if, I mean, think of, we can unpack that, as if they're sort of tacit. I always respond to this now, and why do you think so little of the American farmer that all they can do is grow food if they can pollute without any sort of, with impunity? The other issue is we don't really grow food to eat in Iowa, right? That's part of the issue as well. We get told we hate farmers a lot. Chris and I talk about this a lot. We don't. You've probably heard him say it. They're just making choices that anybody else would do in the system we've created, right? In terms of the policy and the laws. And I would challenge you to think of any system that if you let it go unregulated for decades, wouldn't grow to something that's unsustainable. I mean, that's why we're here. And so that's the other frustrating part, is it's too complicated to fix it. Well, of course it is. It's because we've let it grow to a point where it's beginning to eat itself. And so, those are things that you just got to push back on by acknowledging that this isn't about individuals making those choices. They're making choices a lot of us would probably make given the state at play. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be advocating for something different, that we need to be talking about how we can start finding a way to use our land in Iowa that doesn't pollute our waters and then pass all of that burden on to other people.
Okay. Immigrants, not just in the United States, but around the world, as you see in the UK right now with the riots, the extreme right-wing riots, our group is getting blamed for everything. It's like driving down wages, and they're bringing drugs, and they're bringing violence, they're bringing disease, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, okay, I mean, people can say that, but I think there's many ways to fight the issue, that anti-immigrant sentiment on many issues. But I think having the information and having it in a way that is digestible and where you're able to kind of pivot from that initial kind of like hate or ignorance, and really try to get to the issue that person might be upset about. So, for example, when you're talking about driving down wages, that's something that I heard recently, but it's like, well, it's not immigrants that are driving down the wages. Like, why are we asking, why don't we have a minimum wage increase? Why aren't companies paying enough? Why don't we have labor laws that protect all workers? Because when you protect like the least of us, then you're protecting all of us. So why are we saying like, oh no, these group of people that for many different reasons had to come and leave their, country and and everything, they're driving down wages. Or also, with like crime, it's like, actually, when you look at the statistics, like crime in migrant areas is actually a lot lower. And if you focus on getting migrant communities to be able to collaborate with law enforcement and not be afraid of them, that's going to make your community safer and more, close-knit and have that sense of solidarity. So those are some of the things I think, speaking out and like really trying to get to that issue. What is this person really upset about? Are they upset about healthcare? Oh, they're taking our healthcare. Well, but like, let's look at that. I know that you're upset. I'm upset too, but what is wrong with our healthcare system? Is it because the immigrants are here? Is it because it's a profit-driven system? I would say that. Thank you.
I'll just note that I worked in northern Mexico for, maybe 8 years. And I'd go back and forth across the border, the 80s and the 90s, all of the time, and became friendly with some Border Patrol guys. And I'd be on the bus a lot, and sometimes they let everybody through. They wouldn't check us. Other times they would check everybody and check the status. And so I started talking with them, and I said, why are you letting everybody through today? They said, oh, it's apple picking season in Washington, and we were told to ease up. And so we used to have this sort of informal thing that would happen that whenever we needed the labor, they'd let the pressure valve, come out. So I don't know, we can do it, and we desperately need labor. Why do you think your issues have become so politicized? I think there's different reasons behind them. So why don't we start with Vanessa this time?
I think that there is a lot of anger right now at the way that things are there's, it's no secret that like things in the United States have in a lot of Western countries have changed, and like there's different dynamics in our multipolar world, and economy and all these different dynamics, and people are angry, they feel ignored, and the easiest thing I've seen to do is to blame somebody else. And so it's like the easiest group of people to scapegoat is those who are the newest ones to come. And I think, it's a way to really take off that that pressure on what leadership has been doing, and say, well, no, it's not that we haven't raised wages or we don't have a functioning healthcare system, or that when we need a lot of workers, then it's fine to let them through, but when we don't need a lot of workers, or when we need to blame someone for crime or whatever, then we can blame that group of people. I think it's just been easy to do it, and it's like the lack of acknowledging of an anger that it's like, I'm angry too that there is inflation. I'm angry too that there is, that my dollar doesn't go as far as it used to, or like whenever you travel, you get criticized because you're American because of our horrible foreign policy. And it's like that, I see that anger, but it's like, let's get to the root of it, not deflect. And that's just the easy thing to do, is just to blame somebody else.
I guess since the creation of the EPA, there's always been this sort of false choice that you can either have jobs and business growth or you can have environmental protection. And those arguments and sides dug in and have largely aligned with our political parties, where now people hold to a side simply based on however they vote, which is usually driven by other issues like social issues. I'll say, too, that a big turning point for me that I think has sort of steepened the way in which issues around science and the environment have become politicized was unfortunately the pandemic. I mean, it occurred to me that if we weren't going to have the general public trusting scientists when it's a matter of life and death, we have not a lot of hope to get them to care about clean water that will lead to benefits 30 to 40 years down the road. It's cost today versus those avoided cancer cases down the line. And so that was a moment for me to think about needing to try to change the way we as academics do things. Because if we just sit here and publish our papers and don't be more outward, we don't have any chance. Because the folks that were trying to protect us through that pandemic largely got turned into enemies, right, by a good chunk of the population. And so I think that's sort of, the environment has always been politicized, but I think it's been really sort of worsened through what happened with public health. And when you think about it, protection of the environment is protection of public health. And if you think about who our first lines of defenses are, like the county public health offices that should be better staffed and better resourced, they got hurt during COVID, and that has implications for how we protect our environment. So, it's not easy, and that's probably a really sort of depressing answer. I'm sorry, but it's just the reality of where we're at, unfortunately.
Right.
So I think that the book banning issue has become more prevalent lately because there has been a longstanding effort to sow seeds of distrust in our public education system. I think if you really want to understand it, you should read The Wolf at the Schoolhouse Door if you haven't read it, but we've seen this. It's just part of a long pattern going back 100 years to undermine confidence in public education. And now we have legislators who are trying to, put more money in their donors' bank accounts. They stand to make money from charter schools and public schools and vouchers and all of those things. And what better way to convince people that your public school teacher is an evil person than by selling them that there's pornography in their schools and they're trying to groom your kids. All those things sound terrifying until you realize that they're not at all true. And also, I would attribute it to the rise of white Christian nationalism. Obviously, that should not surprise anyone in this room. But the desire of groups like Moms for Liberty and the power that they have to really kind of push their puritanical views on everyone is also a big force in the book banning effort.
And just as a point of information, that some of you will have read about the controversy in Pella over genderqueer. You heard about that? I'm seeing some heads nodding. That major challenge, all kinds of craziness at the Pella City Council and Pella Library Board meetings. They managed to drive a wonderful librarian out of state. She just had enough, and she's a wonderful, dear friend, and so that's part of the reason we need to continue this fight. Real quick, we've just got a couple of minutes left. What gives you hope?
Seeing this room gives me hope. I think the movement, the solidarity that I saw during the legislative session, a lot of people were very upset at the anti-immigrant bills, and it was a lot of people belonging to my own community, but also a lot of allies. And I'm like, that's amazing. That's really cool. And I think the need for reconnection, that's very human too. That's also giving me a lot of hope. So that gives me hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
I touched on some of this already, and sorry if I went out of order there. But I think one of the things about not just this room, but I think you all understand the job at hand. I think progress is going to be painfully slow, but I've heard you all say that, and that it still makes it a worthwhile fight. I don't know that there's not a quick fix for water quality in Iowa. It's not going to happen overnight, and you have to take those small gains. And so what makes me feel good today is that I think you all understand the assignment, and you have to stick with that, and you have the perseverance. And then I'll go back to the thing about just where kids are at in Iowa, the younger folks. We got to figure out ways to get more of them involved because they do care on these issues. But I'll say it's connected. It's tied to public schools, and it's why we need strong schools. We need to be able to talk to them openly about the science of climate change and what leads to water quality degradation. And so all these issues are tied together. And so I am hopeful, but it is critical to make sure that we fight for all of these things equally, because if you lose one, you undermine the ability to advance the other.
All right, so I'm going to tell you why yesterday's 8th District Court ruling is a reason to be hopeful. So obviously the injunction is removed and books are now officially banned in Iowa schools. So we can be sad about that. They're also going to immediately refile and hopefully get another injunction in place. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that Brenna Bird made a really disturbing argument about libraries are state speech. And basically they can pull or put in whatever they want because it represents the state's views. And the judge ripped her apart on it, said it was extremely poorly written, poorly argued, absolutely ridiculous. So I am in touch with the publishing group Penguin and talked to their lawyers. They're super excited that the judge shot that down. It has lots of implications for current legal filings in other states. So the fact that we have that now as a foundation for future legal proceedings is really optimistic. So there is hope. Penguin is super thrilled about this. So, and they know more about this than I do. So if they're excited, I'm excited, and we should all be excited.
And with that, I'm going to close with another quote from a fellow anthropologist that you already know, but I've got to say it. Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Let's give our panelists a big hand.
Yes. So, yes, I'm out. Sure. Tip. That's the best when you are. Yes, I'm going to say that. It's not. That's not the same. And then get to walk. It's great. And so.
Whew, was that fabulous or what? Let's give him another round of applause. That's getting stuff done.